Hello and welcome to another episode of Unstuck Transformation with Edge. I am your host, Hypnopunk. Today's episode is entitled How to Become Unstuck with Your Boundaries. But before we go ahead with the show, I'd like to thank a big shout out to everyone who's given me 5-star reviews on iTunes, on Google Play and on YouTube. It inspires me to put more of this content out there for free, and it will continue to be for free if I know that you're enjoying it. And the only way that I know you're enjoying it is when you leave those 5-star reviews. I put out more great content for you, so please keep doing that. It inspires me to put more of this stuff out there for you. Please comment on them, share them with your friends, pass them along. And also, to sweeten the deal, wherever you leave a 5-star review, give me a screenshot of it, then shoot me over a message at mail@LUKEnosis.com. That's mail, M-A-I-L, at LUKEnosis, LUKENOSIS.com. And let me know, and we will book a 30-minute power session, a 30-minute unstuck session. And please bear in mind, this is not a hypnosis session, this is not a therapy session. What this is 30 minutes of my time with you to help you get unstuck in a area of your life to get to the next level. We'll brainstorm some ways for you to ascend to that next level and unstick yourself with some Hypnopunk. That being said, on with today's show. Well, what is a boundary? A boundary, a personal boundary, is much like a rule, a law, if you will, a protocol in your own life, which is not governed necessarily by the government. It is governed by yourself. It's basically a set of things, a set of rules, a set of behaviors that you accept from yourself, or you won't accept for yourself, that you accept from other people, or you won't accept from other people, that you accept from the world, or you won't accept from the world. It's basically drawing a line in the sand and saying, hey, I'll take all of this, but I ain't taking any more of this. When it gets to this level, I'm done with it. When somebody keeps pouring water into my glass, and once that glass is full and the water is leaking out, my boundary has now been activated and I am going to enforce my boundary. Or I have a home and there's a fence, and anything can happen outside of that fence in the world. I have no power. But when it comes to someone getting over that fence into my house, into my home, in my environment, I am going to enforce my space and I'm going to kick them out, metaphorically or physically. Boundaries are what you take and what you don't take. Have you ever used terms about yourself? Has anyone ever used terms like you're a pushover, people walk all over you, you don't know how to say no, you are not a strong person, you're weak, you're a pussy? You ever experienced titles like that people have thrown at you? Is that inner voice inside your head ever thrown a voice, a sound, something like that at you? Well, basically what that is it's a boundary violation. So today's podcast is all going to be about how to establish boundaries in your life, to know what your boundaries are, to tell people what your boundaries are, to enforce your boundaries. And if people, including yourself, don't respect your boundaries, then you're going to have to police them, and you're going to have to stand up for yourself. To quote the great Martin Luther King Jr., if a man has not found something that he would die for, then he isn't truly fit to live. So boundaries are what you accept and what you do not accept in the world. Most people don't know what their boundaries are. But yet one day someone does a behavior to you and you get a gut feeling that this behavior is wrong, that you've been mistreated. Now, you've never sat down necessarily, unless you're weird like me, and made notes on what all your boundaries are in relationships, in your health, in business, with other people. But you just know when you're treated wrong, perhaps even by yourself, you get that gut feeling, you get that splinter in your brain, to quote Morpheus in the Matrix, that it just something feels wrong. And you need a way to know what your boundaries are in your health, in your career, in your relationships, where your level is, where the edge is for you. And when you have to basically get online and enforce your boundaries, because people are going to take advantage of yourself, or potentially you could take advantage of yourself. But here's the thing, if you have not established a boundary, yet someone treats you bad one day, yeah, they could be an arsehole, but if they didn't know what your boundary was, because you didn't even know what your boundary was until they treated you to quote treated you badly, then it's not really their fault, because they didn't know what your boundary was, and perhaps you didn't even know what your boundary was, and they're not a psychic, so it's not their fault. So the first thing is establish your boundaries. How to come unstuck. Number one, in boundaries. What are your boundaries? What are you going to accept in your life? What are you going to accept in relationships? Are you going to accept your partner just stealing all your money? Are you going to accept your partner beating the shit out of you? Are you going to accept your partner just being abusive all the time to you and just making you feel like shit all the time? Are you going to accept that? Well, I'd hope not. So then you'd sit down and be like, well, of course I would not accept that. I did not accept someone treating me like that, treating me like that, treating me like that. So make a list of all the behaviours that you would not accept in an area of your life. That could be relationships. In career, it could be, are you going to accept someone stealing money from you? No, well, that would be a boundary for you. Are you going to accept someone... if you have a company consistently showing up late to work? I'd hope not. I hope you run a tighter ship than that. Are you going to accept people having a very low week work rate if they work for you? No, I'd hope that'd be your boundary. What about boundaries when it comes to health? You want to be healthy, so you know, your boundary might be, well, I'm not going to eat carbohydrates, or I'm not going to eat carbohydrates after 6 p.m, or I'm going to work out every day, and if I don't work out every day, I'm not going to watch any television. So you've got to know what your boundaries are in all areas of your life. You've got to sit down with a pen, paper after this podcast, or pause it now, and have 3 pieces of paper on one write career, on one write relationships. That's all relationships, with family, romantic relationships, with friendships. And on the other one write health. That's your fitness, that's your health, that's your mental health, your physical health, all that good stuff. And you're going to write a set of boundaries that you will not accept. And if people, including yourself, cross those boundaries, you're going to enforce them. We're going to get onto that a little bit later on. But first of all, you've got to know what your boundaries are. You've got to know what you will take, and you've got to know what you will not take. You've got to have the balls to draw that line in the sand, so to speak. The second thing is, if your boundaries relate to other people, i.e. they're not just about you, perhaps it's relationships or career, then you've got to make people very, very clear what your boundaries are. If you run a company and someone's showing up late, you've got to make it clear in no uncertain terms to your employee that this is unacceptable. If it's in relationships and your partner is stealing a bunch of money from you, you've got to make it very, very clear, hey, it's not okay for you to steal money off me. If you really want to get in good shape, but you never exercise and you eat a whole 10 tubs of Haagen-Dazs ice cream at 12 o'clock, you've got to enforce your boundary on yourself. Say, hey, I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to accept that. It's not acceptable. You know what? Then I'm not going to watch TV if I'm going to do that. Or I'm not going to play video games because this is unacceptable. You've got to enforce those boundaries on some level, and you've got to inform the other person, even yourself, that there are boundaries. Because if someone is violating your boundaries, coming up to your edge, so to speak, coming onto your grounds, and they don't know what your boundaries are, where your line in the sand is, then it's not really their fault, because they did not know. Again, they're not psychics. You've got to inform people. So once you've informed people, if they respect you, if they love you, then they will ideally respect your boundaries, because now this is step 3. They're aware of what your boundaries are. But however, if they know what your boundaries are, you've explained it to them, yet they are consistently violating your boundaries, then you've got to enforce them. So if you run a company, what does that mean? If that person keeps showing up late or has a weak work rate, what do? Well, you're going to probably have to fire them. If you're in a relationship with someone who just keeps stealing money from you, it just keeps abusing you every day, making you feel like shit every day, no goodness there at all, you're probably going to have to get out of that relationship. If it's with yourself, and your boundary is, well, I go back to the fitness one, I want to get in shape, then you've got to stop eating the ice cream at 10 o'clock at night, okay? You've got to stop eating those Twinkies and those Timmy's donuts at 10, 11 at night and thinking you're going to get in shape. You've got to enforce these. You've got to enforce these and say this is unacceptable. If you do it, you've got to be like, okay, I did that. So now I have to make sure that I don't do it again. So I'm not going to reward myself for this. Rather than having the 10 more donuts because I'm already feeling shitty, I'm going to be like, all right, what else would I usually do this? Well, I'd watch TV. Well, you know what? I'm going to take TV away from doing that now, or playing video games away from eating, because I've just violated my own boundaries, and I'm not going to give myself that positive feedback loop that it's okay to do this. I said feedback loop, didn't I? I meant feedback loop, but that would be a good title for a book. So there's multiple ways that you can enforce them. Again, if it's with yourself, you've got to have that long discussion, but it's with other people, you've got to make them aware of it. And if they keep violating it and don't respect it, these are not the people that belong in your life. You need to get rid of them out of your life. That's number 4. Sometimes you have to get rid of people. You have to get rid of employees. You have to get rid of lovers. You have to get rid of family members. If they keep violating your boundaries, your line in the sand, the things that you hold holy, the things that you hold righteous, the things that you will accept and will not accept, then you've got to kick them out of your life. One of my boundaries is this. One of my boundaries is in the universe. The universe has, actually, let's put the world. The world has what, 7 billion and plus people, right? I have little control over those 7 billion people who are going from A to B every single day. I've got very little control over that. There's good people, there's bad people, there's people that have good days, there's people that have bad days, okay? However, when it comes to me being in my apartment and then people trying to come into my apartment and being rude or being abusive, anything on that level, then that's the little area of my world, or my office, so to speak. That's a little area of the world that I do get to enforce, and I will enforce stringently. I will enforce in a very hard, in a very non-compromising way to myself, by any means necessary, to quote the Black Panther group. I might not be able to control a lot of things in the world, but when it comes to my home, when it comes to my office, this is my world, and people have to treat me the way that I tell them to treat me. And if they do not, they need to get out of my environment as soon as possible before I kick them out. That's one boundary I have. I don't like sound. I don't like too much sound all the time, and I understand that when it comes to the world, I have very little control of that. Okay, but when I'm in my apartment, I don't want to be hearing sounds from my neighbors down the hall. I don't want to be hearing loud blaring music. This is my sanctuary, and although I can't control everything out there, when it comes to being in my apartment, if that sound's coming through, then you better believe that I'm going to enforce my boundary of telling those people in no uncertain terms to keep that noise down. So those are just some examples, but you need to sit down and you need to be honest with yourself, and you need to have those 3 pieces of paper. One with career that we're summarizing now, one with your health, one with relationships, and you put a set of rules down there, a set of things that you will not accept in your life. That's step number 1. Step number 2, if it involves other people, you need to tell them in no uncertain terms that they understand what your boundaries are. Number 3, if people listen to you and respect you, amazing. If they do not respect you, if they do not listen to you, then you're going to have to enforce them. And you're going to have to enforce them by telling them again in maybe a harsher tone, maybe physicality. And potentially with step number 4, you may have to kick people out of your life, loved ones, lovers, family members, clients, friends, if they consistently are violating your boundaries because they are not respecting you. Really, a boundary is a kind of respect for yourself, and I think it's a cornerstone for building up self-esteem. Is boundaries. Boundaries are those pillows, if you will, that hold up your structure of self-esteem, and you've got to enforce them all the time, because here's the thing that's going to happen. When I was a youngster, people would run roughshod over my boundaries. I had very little control of anything that was going on around me. I felt like a ping pong ball. It was very unsettling. It filled me with a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and sadness. I was one end of the pendulum. Then I spent a couple of years and I went to the other end of the pendulum, where I probably enforced my boundaries too rigidly, lost many jobs, many friendships, many relationships by doing this. But I would enforce my boundaries stringently, religiously, every day, even if I thought somebody was remotely taking advantage of me. Even if I was incorrect, I would jump the gun and enforce my boundary. I went the complete other way. Like I said, in some people's terms, I was probably an asshole at that time, but I needed that contrast, that pendulum to swing the other way, for me to find more balance in my life now, where I'm not trigger happy completely all of the time, but if somebody does step up and does violate my boundaries, then you better believe that I am going to enforce them in no uncertain terms. So sometimes you need to do that. You sometimes, in an extreme way, but you need that contrast frame of that pendulum going to the complete other area. But boundaries are so important. They're so important for respecting yourself. They're so important for the universe respecting you. They're so important for other people respecting you, because the way you treat yourself is going to be reflected. So if you're consistently getting people that are violating your boundaries, look inwards, because you're probably shitting all over yourself and violating your own boundaries way before other people do. So the first thing is you fix yourself, you fix your own personal boundaries that we spoke about earlier before you start enforcing them in the real world, because sometimes that can self-correct things. The way you treat yourself, if you treat yourself with love and respect and with your own boundaries and don't accept bullshit of yourself, then it almost seems like a magic bullet, if such a thing, or a magic switch exists, that the world starts to treat you differently. And yes, from time to time you are still going to have to enforce your boundaries in the real world, and it can be scary, but the more you do it, the stronger you get and more mastery you get over that. So I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast on boundaries. I have put together a little checklist on what we've talked about today. 5 ways to become unstuck with your personal boundaries. If you'd like a copy of it, then please shoot me over an email at mail, M-A-I-L, at LUKENOSIS, LUKENOSIS.com, and request that, and I will send it to you. Again, please comment on these podcasts, please pass them along, and it will give me feedback on what to put out there in the future for you. I have been Hypnopunk. This has been another episode of Unstuck. Always believe.